Good afternoon and welcome to today's program, Sweden's Role in Korean Peninsula Diplomacy with Ambassador Peter Semneby. My name is Chelsea Alexander and I'm the Policy Program Officer here at the Korea Society. Today's event is the last program of our Fall 2025 session of the Kim Koo Professional Series. Established in 2015 with the support of the Kim Koo Foundation, the series celebrates 10 years of impactful programming. Today's program is live streamed and available for virtual audiences all around the world. In-person attendance is reserved for Kim Koo Fellows only. Fellows will have a special opportunity to interact directly with today's speaker and one another in a roundtable discussion following the recording. For those interested in becoming a Kim Koo Fellow, please email policy@koreasociety.org for more information and to be notified about the Spring 2026 application cycle. We are pleased to conclude this fall series with a discussion on the history of Sweden's role in Korea, an examination of Sweden's convening capacity, and an investigation of whether Sweden's interests and perspective have been affected by both its ascension to NATO and North Korea's involvement in the war in Ukraine. So there's a lot to discuss today, and that is why we're pleased to be joined by Ambassador Peter Semneby, who is currently the Swedish government's special envoy for the Korean Peninsula. So thank you for joining us, Ambassador. We're very much looking forward to this discussion. And our moderator for today's session is our policy director, Jonathan Corrado. So Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Thanks everybody for showing up in person and for watching us online. Most of all, thank you very much, Ambassador Peter Semneby, for joining us today.
Thank you, Jonathan. Very glad to be here.
So let's start a little bit with your personal history. How did you find yourself in this role, and what's kind of your relationship been with Korea in the past?
Well, I have ended up in this position after more than 20 years, actually, engaging in senior positions on conflict management, conflict resolution, and so on in many different contexts for the Swedish government as ambassador in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and for the European Union. I was special envoy for the European Union for the South Caucasus when the Georgia War occurred, and in the Balkans and other places. My original focus is actually Eastern Europe. I worked, as I mentioned, in the Caucasus. I worked in Russia, Ukraine. All of this is, of course, also relevant for the Korea file today. I'm relatively new to Korean affairs. I've done this job for 2 years now. I did, though, one stint in the past, which I didn't put on my CV until I got this job, and that is a period of 1 month as the chargé d'affaires of the Swedish embassy in Pyongyang back in 1997.
Wow.
Which was a period, actually, quite an interesting period, when the agreed framework had been concluded relatively recently, and there was great expectations that this would actually lead to a way forward on the nuclear issue. And even during this short period, this 1 month, I had the opportunity to receive one American, I think it was a C-17, landing at Sunan Airport in Pyongyang with Senator Sam Nunn and
Wow.
Ambassador James Laney.
Wow.
Coming there, negotiating on behalf then of President Clinton at the time.
Heady and hopeful days for the trajectory of U.S.-North Korea relations, and unfortunately things did not go as anticipated. Could you just tell us for a second about your specific role and title? Because this is fairly unique, and maybe our audience might not be familiar with the special envoy to the Korean Peninsula.
Well, Sweden has, I should mention when I describe my role that, well, of course, I'm here as a Swedish official, and what I say is Swedish policy, in line with Swedish policy, but my analysis may not actually be stated Swedish policy. So I have to make this this
Yes,
caveat as well. Sweden actually has a very long-standing engagement in the Korean Peninsula. It stretches back to the Korean War. Sweden was not part of the military operations during the war, but Sweden was a major humanitarian actor. And in fact, since after I got this job, I learned that the largest humanitarian operation that Sweden has ever launched in terms of the number of personnel involved was a field hospital that we ran in Busan during the war, with well over 1,000 people involved in total. This was a major reason why Sweden was invited when the armistice was signed to be part of the Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission. And in fact, we have our peacekeepers there, a small group. It's just half a dozen people, a small group of peacekeepers that have maintained a constant presence in Panmunjom since 1953. Sweden established relations with ROK quite relatively early, but perhaps even more significant for the kind of work that I'm doing. Sweden was the first Western country to recognize the DPRK in 1973 and to open an embassy there in 1975, exactly 50 years ago, which in turn made Sweden a natural choice for the United States to turn to when the United States needed a country to represent its interests in the wake of the signing of the agreed framework. So we've had this special task as representing American interests now for exactly 30 years. And not only American interests, we represent Australia and Canada as well.
So this is the protecting power status. And so you help America when there's consular issues and other types of representation needed. And one example of this would be the Travis King episode that happened recently.
Absolutely. In a narrow sense, this agreement with the United States involves consular representation. And this has actually been quite an active file. It's not only Travis King. You are all aware of quite a significant number of Americans who have been detained for various reasons in the DPRK over the years, but in addition to this consular work, although it's not written into our agreement, there's also a role in terms of facilitating contacts, dialogue, sometimes passing messages, sometimes the channel is completely quiet, and hosting meetings at periods in time when the file is more active than it has been over the course of the last few years.
Yeah. So I want to get to that very active time in just a second. But first, to clarify your role, because it's so interesting, there is a Swedish ambassador to South Korea, there's a Swedish ambassador to North Korea, and then there's envoy for Korean Peninsula. So why is there a need for this? And it's so unique and very interesting.
Well, it's not really unique to have a special envoy for special functions, conflict-related issues, and so on, where there is a need for facilitation of dialogue, contacts, talks, bringing people together, and acting creatively in order to find solutions to difficult problems that stretch beyond one country where a bilateral ambassador would be active. We have our bilateral ambassadors who are responsible for relations on the ground with DPRK and with ROK, but there are in order to play a role on this file, you also need to engage broadly than in the strictly bilateral sense, also regionally, globally, even.
Excellent. Okay, so let's get into 2018, 2019, this period where Sweden was doing a lot, and a lot of it was quiet and understated. But was there playing a key supporting role during a number of very important moments? So before Singapore, before Hanoi, when things fell apart, trying to put the pieces back together. In late 2019, Stockholm was hosting meetings throughout this time. So can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah. If it had been a year ago, I would probably not have told you very much, because we have been reasonably quiet about the role that we have played. But this role has now been described in some detail, actually, in a recent book by Joel Witt, one of the real veterans of negotiations with DPRK, former State Department official. And if he manages to sell a few more copies as a result of this talk here, I'm very happy to contribute to the sales, because I found it a very interesting read. At that time, there were three major events that took place in Sweden. We had a visit by the foreign minister of North Korea in early 2018 in March. That contributed to setting the stage for the Singapore summit. We then organized a meeting in a wider group, also including American negotiators. Steve Biegun was one of them. North Korean negotiators, the current foreign minister, former at that time Deputy Foreign Minister Choi Sun-lee.
Now former foreign minister.
Yeah, and South Koreans as well. That took place in January of 2019, and it's all described in the book. Even the icy lake at the shore of which this meeting took place. And then after the failure of the Hanoi summit and after the meeting in Panmunjom, there was another meeting in the fall of that year, which didn't really lead to any result. It collapsed quite quickly, and I think it's, well, you will read the story yourself, but it seems then from Joel's account that it was, let's say, inevitable that that particular meeting would not produce any result. But it was actually quite a major effort involving many different actors on the Swedish side and many different levels, including the very highest level.
Mm. Why has Sweden been so successful at hosting this type of supportive diplomacy for Korea?
Well, I think it's the long-standing engagement that has probably created a sense that we are a serious actor. It's I think it's also probably an advantage to be a faraway country which has this kind of record of consistent and level-headed political engagement in combination with the strong humanitarian record. I think that is creates trust among all the various actors. I think without this long role of engagement, it would have been much more difficult to play this kind of role.
And so if we fast forward to the pandemic, of course, all the foreign embassies empty out of Pyongyang, and Sweden was one of the first Western embassies to get back into North Korea in 2024. So can you tell us about what's changed since the pandemic? I imagine that the diplomatic atmosphere is quite different these days, and perhaps even the North Koreans' willingness to engage.
Yes, Sweden was actually the first European country to be invited back, and the embassies have been invited back one by one, basically, and which is an indication that the North Koreans are taking a very cautious approach, very cautious step-by-step approach to re-engagement with the international community, and that also sets the tone a little bit in Pyongyang. It is a different atmosphere. It's sort of all the interaction is more tentative than it used to be. But at the same time, it is moving in a direction of greater engagement. I sense that this all the time. We have, of course, also contacts with DPRK through their embassy in Stockholm, and I sense that they are also preparing for looking towards the day when a broader engagement will be possible.
Because if I recall correctly, from the time that President Trump in his first administration said he's willing to talk to Kim Jong-un and sit down with him, it took like a week to have this meeting in Stockholm, and that was instrumental in helping. So things can move quite quickly.
Things can move quite quickly, but at the same time, it doesn't happen just out of nowhere. The ground is slowly being prepared. I think, but you're right. Things can happen quite quickly.
So some tantalizing foreshadowing there that we might expect some.
I don't have any idea how quickly it will happen. If it happens, it's still hypothetical, of course.
Should we expect some kind of major announcement by Kim at this 9th Party Congress about what his general policy will be towards the United States, towards South Korea? A lot of expectation here. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's not every day that the Korean Workers' Party organizes a party congress. It's only the 9th Party Congress. And DPRK and the party just celebrated its 80th anniversary. Mm-hmm. So on average, it's once a decade, and that means that this is a major occasion, and there will be statements, major statements on policy for a fairly long period ahead in time. We don't know what these statements will be, but the Congress is, after all, taking place in an atmosphere and in an environment where there has been a gradually increasing engagement with the international community. And I'm not only talking about the North Korea's engagement with Russia. I'm also talking about the appearance of Kim Jong-un in Beijing for the victory celebration after the World War II victory celebration. I'm talking about the public communication that is actually taking place between DPRK and the United States. That there is actually communication in the public sphere. Chairman Kim and President Trump are communicating with each other, and this is all part of the backdrop to the party Congress. But what the decisions and what the policies will be that come out of this meeting, it's we will only know when it happens.
And I think you've identified some of those hopeful signals that folks are looking out for in terms of reviving the dialogue. But just to throw these out there and sound them off you, some other ideas that folks have expressed is perhaps locking in the two hostile states policy that was articulated by Kim Jong-un in 2023, a renunciation of pursuing unification. So that's something that folks are looking out for. Perhaps Kim Jong-un's promotion to Grand Marshal, another thing that folks are kind of expecting, and looking at some sort of territorial claims in the sea there that could conflict with the established lines. So not to be a downer, but just to mention those.
No, of course, there's always conflict potential, and it's important to be prepared for that. It's still an open question. But this is my personal reflection now. What the change of the or abolishment of the unification policy actually means. There are those who see this as an ominous sign. There are others who see it as an adaptation to reality and perhaps setting the stage for a negotiation on a peace regime for the Korean Peninsula, which would be more difficult to negotiate under the previous policy. After all, the maps produced in DPRK now portray two Korean states, not one Korea as they did only a year ago.
That's really interesting view. So as we've talked about, one of the really important aspects of Sweden's ability to play this arbiter role has been its neutrality. But now that Sweden has joined NATO, and now that North Korea has been a belligerent in the Russo-Ukraine war, have Sweden's interests changed at all?
I often get the question about Sweden's neutrality and whether what Sweden's membership of NATO means, and I would say it means very little in the Korean context. Sweden may not be neutral anymore in the classical sense of the word, but Sweden is still neutral in the Korean sense of the word. The reason why Sweden was invited to joined the Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission when the armistice was signed was that Sweden had a strong humanitarian record and had not participated in the military operations during the war. And that is the kind of neutrality that is relevant in the Korean context. There were two other, there were originally 4 members of the NNSC. There were 2 other countries that were definitely not neutral for most of the time that they were part of the NNSC, and that is Poland and Czechoslovakia that were part of the Warsaw Pact. While NATO has, of course, important partnerships with countries in the region, including the ROK, it's also important to note that the defense commitments cover only the territory of its member states. So Sweden is still sees itself as an actor in relation to the Korean Peninsula that our role, as far as we see it, it is to act in matters relating to the Korean Peninsula in a way that is fair and objective. I think that's another way of saying that we will be will continue to observe the kind of neutrality in a specifically Korean context that we have done for 72 years by now.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about humanitarian efforts. Have they been affected by, I know that one of the frustrations is that it's been very difficult to get humanitarian operations back up and running since the pandemic. Border closures have been so strict and severe. Just wonder if you had any insight into any of that in Sweden in particular.
Yes, indeed, and this is mostly relating to mostly, but not only, relating to the DPRK declining offers of humanitarian support. While we can only speculate about the reasons why they have done so, I think it's probably part of a policy to be as resilient as possible to avoid being dependent on external sources of assistance. One such example was, for example, the floods that hit the northern parts of the country in particular last year. I believe that almost all there were quite a few offers of assistance that were all declined. There have been some exceptions to this, and there is an interest on the part of the DPRK for some medical assistance.
Interesting. Okay, thanks for letting me know. I also wanted to note that we both read a piece by Steve Norper for NCNK about Sweden's role on the Korean Peninsula. So shout out to Stephen for writing a good piece. So let's talk about this current impasse. And of course, it's very different from the impasse of 2017. And yet some things are the same. Some interesting elements are the same. So are there any interesting and creative ideas that we can utilize to get us back into the space where we're talking to one another again?
We have now again the two main actors in Pyongyang and Washington that we did at that time. We also have a relatively new administration in Seoul that is reminiscent of the, with some of the same faces, not all of them, but some of the same faces that we had at that time. What is different is that, well, the world is not the same that it was in 2017, and the DPRK is not the same. It has gone through a period of massive upgrading of its military capabilities during this period. It's also isolated itself from external contacts and influences in a way that is quite, what should I say? Well, extreme, even by past standards. The Russian-Ukrainian War is a new factor that is definitely an obstacle in terms of launching a process, both in political terms, but also in terms of bandwidth. But at the same time, I think it's probably fair to say that I don't personally think that the war as such will end soon, but I think the active phase of this war we may see an end of the active phase of the war. And that will, of course, improve the possibilities of engaging the DPRK. And in fact, we've already seen the DPRK disengaging. North Korean military personnel are no longer taking place in the fighting. There are memorials being erected in Pyongyang to those who have died during the war, and that is a sign also that this phase is over. The fact that the 9th Party Congress is coming up provides an opportunity for the DPRK, if they so decide, to set the stage for a renewed process. The elephant in the room here is, of course, denuclearization. It will be, well, I guess I simplify a lot if I guess I probably caricature the positions if I say that the position of the United States has been, we will not talk to you unless you commit to denuclearization before the talks start. And the DPRK position has been that we will not talk unless you promise that you will never ask us to denuclearize. So one has to find a way around that. There are many other things that can be that are relevant and can be discussed. Also on the relating to the nuclear file. I think one can envisage an agenda that does not include denuclearization, but at the same time does not explicitly exclude it either, and which will allow talks on on other relevant matters like crisis management, crisis communication, perhaps even a freeze of various programs. There are many things that are relevant that can then, where we don't know where they will lead, but they could open the way for a broader discussion. One could also envisage starting a discussion on matters relating to a peace regime for the Korean Peninsula. It's always been part of the agenda in the six-party talks, in the Singapore Declaration, but it's never been the at the top of the agenda. Sooner or later, if one starts such a discussion, it will also have to touch upon the nuclear issue. But maybe it's possible to design the agenda in such a way that one does not start with the most difficult and most contentious issue at the outset. That may actually if you do that, you run the risk of ruining the atmosphere from the very beginning. But these are really just my personal views. This is not policy. But I've been talking, obviously, in my capacity with a lot of experts, and including many of the people who have negotiated on behalf of the United States, but also on behalf of other countries in the six-party talks and so on. So there is no lack of ideas. And I'm convinced no lack of possibilities for getting a relevant and productive discussion going. It's just that the key is probably not to be too prescriptive about the outcome at the very outset.
Well, I asked for creative ideas for pathways forward, and I think you certainly delivered that. And these types of programs about intractable problems, I like to have a dose of hope, and you've delivered that too. Any final thoughts for our audience here before we transition to our discussion with the fellows?
Well, I think this is a very important discussion. I'm very happy that you have invited me and to make this presentation about what role Sweden has been playing and could play. We are doing this, as I mentioned, as part of our engagement in Korean affairs, which is genuine, but also as responsible players on global matters, because this is an issue that is not only about the two Koreas. It's not only about DPRK and the United States. It's also about the structure and viability of major international agreements and institutions. The non-proliferation regime, for example, we didn't touch upon that, but there are major aspects that pertain not only to North Korea specifically, but to other countries as well that are at stage here. So these are all matters that are of concern to us, and I know a lot of others, and are underpinning our continued engagement. So we will be available. We are. I would say that the Swedish role here is a light touch role. We are not imposing ourselves in any way. But if there is an opening and if there is a demand for the kind of role that a country like Sweden can play, given our role, historical role, and so on, we are certainly willing to fill that role.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for meetings in Stockholm in 2026. Thank you so much. Please help me to thank and express our appreciation to Ambassador Peter Semneby.
Thank you.